Well, good morning. So, today on the channel, we're talking about the winner of last week's Challenge of the Week and the new challenge. And also, can a writer give you writing advice, good writing advice? Can another writer suggest changes or direction to you? And should you listen to them? Hopefully, my opinion won't discourage you, but inspire you. Stick around. So, what inspires you? What gets you out of bed in the morning? What gives you the thrive to survive? For me, it could be a number of things from, I don't know, the Fonz to Slayer to a burger in a faraway place or to reading a novel and catching a nice head change. Oh, before I continue, I want to say thank you to Earthworks Audio. And full disclosure, Earthworks did not send me this microphone. It's not a review or it's not a spotlight. It's a notion of gratitude to them. I ordered this microphone I paid with my own money from a seller on Amazon. A seller snag put me on the phone with them. On the other end of that phone call were two just lovely gals, and they were so human and funny and warm and awesome. And then about 25 minutes after, Nick called me from Earthworks, and we talked about this ethos that I bought, and he and I had this incredible, this beautiful hour-long conversation about art, about audio, microphones, their history, and it was just a really good. It was a really, it was a flawless consumer experience. But not just all that, but if anybody out there is looking to start a channel or create content or record an audiobook, anything they do for audio, look at this microphone. And I never plug, you guys know me, I don't plug any products here, but give the Earthworks Ethos a shot. It's like a dynamic mic on steroids. It's a beautiful natural microphone. So I want to say thank you to Earthworks Audio, to Nick at Earthworks, and get the ethos. And before we dive into our challenges, we want to welcome a writer brand new to prose. So say a big hello to Eddie Black. What a cool name, right? If my name happened to be Eddie Black, I'd use it every chance I got. I'd be like, hey, yeah, I'll take a triple meat lovers and, here's my address. Oh, my name, Eddie Black. Just Eddie Black. It just says it all. It's not like I wouldn't be Ed. I wouldn't be whatever. I'd just be Eddie Black. So this is Eddie Black with Cardinal Sin Numero Dos. And you can find him. Just Google him. You don't have to go far. Cardinal Sin Numero Dos. There is a sin coming up second to rape and sitting right above murder, and is the cardinal sin of being boring. There is no shortage of boring, damned people, an extreme surplus of them. They have been ruining the world and collapsing civilizations since there have been civilizations worth collapsing. Interesting men have always gone to war to run their bayonets through other interesting men because of the needs of boring men to feel adequate to grab at other sources of power due to their lack of being something on their own. Boring men destroy interesting women, so a man with more doesn't steal them away and leave them with his dick in his hand. And boring women erode interesting men from the inside, because when they fell in love with him for his ways, they didn't expect it to be so hard to outshine him, so they decide he is an oppressor and start to sharpen the guillotine slat. Boring people wage terrorism on the others of us every day with their woes and their boring, cancerous conversations, and it chews at the rest of our contentment with living. We see their rules and their governments and their sycophantic societies, and we decide we'd rather be somewhere else because if they are right, it is too much to bear being wrong. So we grab interesting tools built by interesting gunsmiths, and we cross the crevasse of fear and knowing and make an interesting scene for someone else to find and wonder, how could someone do something like that? What a coward. Was he sick? Look at these scribblings on every surface and all those books. He must have been sick. Yes, he surely was. My goodness, goodness me. Anyway, I have to get this over with. The game is on at 7. They are playing the whatevers. Cardinal sin numero dos. Mamba writes, Fan-fucking-tastic. Welcome home, my friend. Yeah. Fuck yeah. Welcome home, man. Chris Adhill. Well, you must have been a pro wrestler because that's one hell of a grand entrance into bros. Welcome and hello to you, my brother. You will rise quickly here, I am sure. Yes, you will. Did I spotlight this? I did. Good. Okay, so welcome, Eddie Black. Oh, and by the way, for the new challenge of the week, it's going to be write a poem about everything to you, or a story. It's going to be along those lines. I'm going to create it and post it. I'll link it here, but it's going to drop the same time this video drops. Every time I try to write one, you guys always beat me to it, and there are like 10 entries before the video comes out, so I'm on to you. I'm going to sound like a broken record, but this challenge of the week was really tough to call. Again, I had, I think, 10. I whittled it down to 10. Then I found 2, and so I was at a fork in the road with 2, but 4 people on our staff all picked the one that won. And I wanted to mention the honorable mention first because it really got to me. And that runner-up is Shallowgenepool with Narrow Escapes, Proving Motherfuckers Wrong. This was just beautiful to read. I read this twice, just back to back, like on a loop. And this is my first set of emotions had to be hatred for the parents. But as I read it, I was like, okay, there's a method there, maybe accidentally, but it was still a method. And what I got out of this was the way this writer, the way he just showed this bleeding wound that's now this like really like proud scar, right? And but the way he wrote this story, the bravery, the guts, it's a fucking oddity. This is beautiful. So I love this, and Huckleberry Who nailed it when he said, here's a like from one of the motherfuckers. Funny thing about narrow escapes, they always happen in the nick of time. So, yeah, this is good. So, read this one. I will link this in the description. It'll get you. And on to the winner. So the winner is Ledlevee, Ethan, and Jamie. So this is just fucking awesome, this piece. I read this and I couldn't stop. I was just smiling all the way through this. This was on the back burner of this guy's brain for a long, long time. It had to have been. This is so hard-hitting and fun to read. Just the radical close-ups and pull-aways and the smash cuts. And Mariah wrote, I love this, great story. Always a kind word from this writer. And Sad Hill again. Yeah, this is great. And Sad Hill nailed it, by the way. Bra fucking oh, brother. I'm getting those Tarantino vibes. Yeah, kind of. Love the sarcasm and humor build-up. So this is Ledlevee. This is just devastating, my friend. Good job. You deserve that $25. Go buy a bottle of whiskey. I would. Look at this. I mean, this is just, I don't have time to read this whole thing. I wish I did. But look at, I mean, this is the opening. Ethan and Jamie sat at the bar sipping whiskey as the bartender poured for another patron. The wooden fork creaked as newcomers came in, their stirrups clinking as they walked. Ethan sipped his drink. It was harsh, but the warmth went through him and his head was feeling a little lighter. You think we're clear? He looked down at the Colt revolver on his girlfriend's hip. I don't think we're ever going to be clear again, she said in her breathy voice. It always turned Ethan on a little, especially when she was angry. What with the law after us as well as Harry and the rest of the gang? What about once we're over the border? Though they were speaking quietly, there weren't many other patrons in the bar. Ethan was worried their voices might carry. You heard what happened to Butch and Sundance, right? Jamie asked. Who didn't? Ethan took a bigger swig from his whiskey. It was all in the papers. Honey, we're going to be watching our backs the rest of our lives. Ethan loved the way her long black hair looked beneath her beige cowboy hat in the dim light of the saloon. He loved her brown eyes and the freckles on her face. She was cute, but dangerous. Everything Ethan loved, wrapped up in one perfect woman. "I'll watch your backside anytime, babes." She rolled her eyes and chuckled. "You're an asshole." "So what do we do it for, then?" Ethan asked as he looked into his mostly full glass. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I thought the plan was leave Harry and the rest, run to the border, and we're finally free." He took 2 big swigs from his whiskey. "If we're not free, then what's the point?" She shrugged and took a drink. "Nothing better to do, I guess. We can survive another day. Maybe." "Maybe," Ethan repeated. He chugged the rest of his drink and put down some coins for another. Jamie was an Indian from the Dakota Territory, a Sioux. Her parents had been murdered in front of her when she was a kid, and she was picked up by some soldiers and taken south. She performed in Wild West shows and was raped repeatedly, and ended up turning to working in brothels. One day she decided she'd had enough and turned to robbing banks. That's when Harry found her and brought her into the gang. Ethan saw her, and the rest was history. Jamie was the fastest draw Ethan had ever seen. Plus, she was strong as anyone and smart, and of course, beautiful. She was 20 now, but old and hardened beyond her years. The saloon door swung open, and in walked a tall man dressed in all black with an eye patch and a short, stout fellow with a brown vest and hat. The tall man's hat was black with a band of silver skulls, and he had 2 shiny silver Smith & Wesson revolvers on his hips. As his one mean eye scoured the barroom, Ethan tried to think of what to say to his brother. Harry Delahaye, the leader of the Deep Gorge Gang. Harry and his lackey, bald-faced Joe, approached Ethan and Jamie, and Ethan wasn't sure who drew first, but he drew both of his guns, pointing one at Harry's head and one at Joe's head. When all was said and done, Harry had one gun pointed at Ethan's face and one at Jamie's. Jamie's gun was pointed at Joe, and Joe's gun was pointed at Jamie. Everyone else in the barroom cleared out quickly, except the bartender Fred, who was ducking behind the bar. Joe laughed. "Well, looky here. We got ourselves a Canadian sit-down." "Mexican standoff, dumbass," Jamie muttered. "Nobody's asking you, Injun," Joe blurted. He'd always been a rebel bigot. Ethan had always hated that about him. Harry smiled, looking at Ethan with his mean eye. "There's no reason for things to get bloody here, folks. We're all family here, right? Let's all put our guns down and talk this out." "Not a chance," Ethan said. "We put our guns down and you'll kill us." Harry grinned. "We're brothers." "That's why I know you so well," Ethan said. "I've been looking after you our whole lives," Harry said. "You think I'd kill you now?" "You'd kill her," Ethan said, nodding to Jamie, "and I can't let you do that." Harry was right. Their family was from Kentucky. They were bourbon distillers. They'd grown up together in the Appalachians. When they were old enough, Harry joined Morgan's Raiders in the Confederate Army, and Ethan soon followed. They weren't much for the cause, but they loved blowing up Union Railroad bridges and stealing supplies. On many occasions, Harry saved Ethan's life. His older brother had always looked out for him. It was an easy transition to go from raiders to bank robbers, after spending some time in a Union prison, of course. "I can't believe you betrayed me like this," Harry said, "after everything I've done for you." Ethan looked down the barrel of his gun as he aimed at Harry and Joe. He glanced at Jamie out of the corner of his eye. She was steady as ever. They were all experienced gunmen. Nobody would be making a mistake. It was all about looking for that opening. "Everything you've done for him," Jamie asked Harry. "How about you? After everything you've been through together, you wouldn't let him leave the gang? How about that?" Harry chuckled as he continued aiming his pistols. "And he'd leave us for a 2-timing slutty cunt like you. I can't be letting all you leave and go blabbing the location of our hideout to the sheriff once you get picked up." "We ain't gonna get picked up," Jamie said. "Ain't you heard what happened to Butch and Sundance?" Joe asked. "That was in South America, you idiot," Jamie said. "Ain't that where you're going?" Joe asked. "No," Jamie said. "We're going to Mexico." "Same difference," Joe said. Why don't you put your guns down and let us go? Ethan asked. How's this worth killing or getting killed over? Just let us go. I already said we can't do that, Harry said. But Ethan, you can leave this whore and just come back with us. It'll be like old times. Ethan smiled and shook his head. You know that ain't happening. And call her a whore again, I'll shoot you out of principle. I don't care what else happens. Joe, who was pointing his gun at Jamie's head, smiled. Well, I'd blow her pretty brains out for one. I just call 'em like I sees 'em, Harry said. She's a fucking whore, and go ahead and shoot me. You'd be doing me a favor. Harry was crazy and suicidal. He always had a death wish. That's what made him such a great outlaw, and that's what made him so scary and dangerous. Ethan looked from gun to gun, going through all the scenarios. If he shot Harry and Joe, he had a slight chance of getting them both. But the more likely scenario was he'd kill one, and the other would kill Jamie, leaving him alone to take out whoever was left. But if Jamie was dead, this would all be for nothing. He pictured her pretty head exploding in a red spray and shook off the thought. Well, somebody's got to do something, Jamie said. We just can't sit here pointing our guns at each other indefinitely. Somebody's going to have to pee eventually. Shut up, cunt, Joe said. Jamie started making pissing sounds. Psst, psst. I said shut up, Joe said. Jamie chuckled. Bald-faced Joe. You do have to piss, don't you? Go ahead, piss yourself like the coward you are. Joe gritted his teeth. I'm about to kill you, hooker. You do. I'll splatter your brains on the wall, Ethan said. Jamie laughed. Ain't much there. Wouldn't be too much cleanup involved. Oh, fuck you, Joe said. You always thought you was so smart. But tell me this. If you're so smart, how did you end up here with two guns pointed at your head? She was staring down Harry and Joe's barrels. Well, you're right about one thing, Jamie, Harry said. This ain't getting us nowhere. Somebody's gonna have to do something. Ethan knew his best chance was to fire both guns, killing Harry and Joe simultaneously. But he had to be perfect. If he missed, or hit one and not the other, or if he wasn't quite fast enough, Jamie was dead, and this was all for nothing. Maybe he could shout, duck, and Jamie would duck, then he could shoot Harry and Joe. But what if she didn't duck? They'd likely both end up dead. Harry smiled at him. Come on, little brother. Drop this bitch. Ethan considered it for a split second. That would definitely be his best chance of getting out of this alive. But who's to say Harry wouldn't kill him later? How could Harry ever trust him after this? And either way, Ethan loved Jamie. There was no way he could leave her. There was no way he could let her die like that. If he had to choose between Jamie and his brother, he'd choose her every time. The saloon doors flapped open, and in walked the sheriff and his deputy. Both immediately drew their revolvers. Everyone was distracted, and Ethan fired both pistols. Harry's and Joe's heads jerked back, and blood and brains flew everywhere. The sheriff and the deputy fired. Jamie fell and several glasses shattered. On her way down, Jamie shot the sheriff in the head. Ethan fired his pistol at the deputy, hitting him in the chest. The deputy dropped his gun and took a few steps back. Ethan fired twice, hitting him in the face each time and sending the deputy sprawling into the floor. Ethan rushed to Jamie, who was picking herself up from the floor. You okay? Ethan asked. You hit? She shook her head. Sheriff hit the stool next to me and hit me and I lost my balance. Thank God, Ethan said. Jamie smiled. Since when did you believe in God? Ethan smiled back. Since one of his angels fell down from heaven and agreed to flee to Mexico with me. She laughed and shook her head. You cheesy asshole. Really, go fuck yourself with that ridiculous line. I'd rather be fucking you, he said. The two of them stood. Fred the bartender also stood. Am I okay? Jamie grinned. Yeah, you're okay. She tossed him some coins. Pour yourself a drink. He nodded and poured some whiskey in a glass and chugged it. Well, let's get out of here, Ethan said. He looked down at his dead brother and frowned. It was a shame it had to end this way. And let's not stop in any more saloons till we're in Mexico. Agreed, Jamie said, as she put her arm around him and they walked towards the swinging doors. Well, I guess I did have time to read it. What a good story, right? What a good story. So, Ledlevee, congratulations again. Well earned. Well done. Well done. And to wrap this up, should you ask another writer to look at your work, critique your work, help you out a little bit? So, in my entire career as a novelist, a short story writer, whatever, poet, in every reading or signing I've done, I'll always meet one, if not, well, more than one writer who will say, walk up to me with their manuscript, or he or she will be like, hey, I wrote this. What's your email? Can you read this? Give me your thoughts. What would you do? And while I love to read other writers, obviously. I mean, I'm a voracious reader. I go on to prose. It's like my eye candy, my brain candy. But I'm of the opinion that, how do I put this without sounding a certain way? My answer is no. Just because your work is your work and you're going to evolve however you're going to evolve. And I think if you have something you're working on and if you're really unsure about it, I would say do it anyway. You're going to learn that way. If you come to me and say, hey, um, how would you do this? I can offer some syntax advice, maybe some, tone down how superfluous it is, or try this instead of this, take out this word, use that simile and use a comma, blah, blah, blah. But the ultimate choice, the last choice is yours. And I think that a writer can actually help you not grow. And I say that from a stance of like freedom. When you're on prose and you're posting, post whatever you want, experiment, have fun, have fun. It's not a job. It's expression. It's that. It's beautiful. It's caustic. It's angry. It's fucked up. It's all those things that make us, flesh. So I would say this. I would say in my entire career, to finish my point, I've had one writer help me with my work with one word. Now, my editor is a totally different ball of wax. That's a whole video. That crazy fucker. I mean, I sure owe him a lot. But I'll say this much about writers helping writers. This guy I knew back in like 2008, I think. We were talking in the bar one day, and he had read March of Time and Skin, the manuscript, before it was published. And there was a line when the character was on a fishing boat in Alaska, and he saw a whale, and it got to him after a big storm. They almost died. The whole ship almost went down, right? And he said in the sentence of this part of the book, right? And to preface this, I am non-religious. My character is non-religious, but I said really fast. My sentence was, I wanted to be chosen by the gods there, to be pulled out amongst the clean, cold blackness of the water, right? So my writer friend, he said, you know what? I would change that to be, say, chosen by God there. It's more powerful. And I thought about that, and I chewed on that for about 3 hours. And I thought, you know what? That's fucking great advice. One piece of advice in over 3 decades of doing this that's actually made one sentence to me better. And he was right. It made that whole paragraph. It challenged the perception of the character. It also opened up a whole new dialogue down the road for what was God to this character. It was everything he didn't know about. Familiar to me. So I think that there's nothing wrong with reaching out and going, hey, what do you think of this? But they're not tablets from the mountain. It's somebody else's spin on your work. Create freely, create openly. If you're not sure about something, it doesn't mean you're not ready. It just means you're unsure about something. Ask away. But do I think it can really help you along? I don't. Do I think it's good to get feedback? Especially when you're new? I do. But in my opinion, you want to talk to people who like to read and not write. But that's not to say that there aren't exceptions, because there are. So it's my 2 cents. It might be worthless to you, but I want to throw that in there because every so often I'll get asked, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? And apart from reading it and just liking to read it, I really wouldn't know how to advise somebody on how to write. And I think that if you're a writer and you're new to prose, or even if you're seasoned, you're like Gerard DeLeo, or you're like Area Man, or you're like Shallowgenepool, or Ledlevee, Mi Zhang, all these amazingly skilled authors would love to talk to you about your work. But ultimately, you have to go with what makes you, what feels good to you. And if it feels good to you, it doesn't feel good to somebody else, fuck them. You cannot please everybody. And if you want to, there's something, a little crazy about you in a bad way. Write your work, be a steamroller. It has one function: create, have fun, try new things. But don't rely on somebody else's advice for your work. Your work is the work, bottom line. Okay, well, I have to get out of here. Thank you guys for being here, and I will talk to you in the next video. Take good care.